Hi, I'm Marty Nemko. Career advice for today's school psychology students. I'll be giving a talk tomorrow, and even though you're probably not a school psychology student, you might benefit from knowing the essence of what I'm going to say. In my talks, I usually don't start by telling my own story because it seems egotistical, but I'm going to try it tomorrow, briefly, and tailor to my audience. I hope it'll make me more relatable and credible in a human way rather than just from what the introducer says. I'll explain that I felt I'd be a better school psychologist if I had more teaching experience. So after finishing my PhD, I taught middle school in Richmond, California. Then I became a lecturer at Cal State East Bay, then Davis, and then at Berkeley, in the ugly predecessor to the beautiful building in which we will be sitting. When teaching at Davis, the chairman showed me its demonstration kindergarten. On a student's desk was a children's word processor. It was 1984, and I'd never used a computer before. But I figured if kindergartners could do it, so could I. Since then, I have enjoyed writing revision without whiteout. Anyway, after opening remarks, I usually give a mini lecture, a verbal listicle of a few points that are important and not obvious to my audience. But instead, tomorrow, I'm going to present 3 core decisions that my audience, doctoral students in school psychology, need to make. I think that's more interactive and personalized than a list of points. Anyway, here are those 3. Ride with the wave. There are more jobs that are aligned with current trends, for example, school psychologists who focus on special needs and immigrant kids, than on native-born gifted kids. But there's also more competition for those jobs, because current funding priorities and professional emphasis focus on helping have-nots. On the other hand, if your personal interests and values aren't so aligned with the wave, for example, you worry that gifted kids have become underserved, the good news is that you may have less competition these days for such jobs, although there will be fewer, most likely in private schools. And that brings me to the second decision that school psych students can make: where to work. Do you care whether you're working in a public school, suburban, urban, rural, private school, religiously affiliated or not, an education or psychology nonprofit, or the private sector? Regarding the latter, school psychologists may find work on a team, developing new educational or psychological products, tangible or digital. I have a client who's on a team that's developing a mental health app that's machine learning driven and thus ever more customized based on the user's experience. Self-employment is also a possibility, for example, doing private assessment of children, for example related to autism, executive function, or giftedness. Third choice, an under-the-radar niche. Many people appreciate having colleagues in the same field, but other people prefer a more frontier role, for example, eating disorders in BIPOC women, or adult males who believe they have attention deficit disorder. The more specific your intersection, the less replaceable you become. Of course, you don't want to be so specific that the market is too tiny. Then I'll do what I call 3-minute workovers on volunteers from the audience, trying to help them with the career issue they ask about. And I'll end by telling my dad's story. The year was 1939. The town was Sierpes, Poland, a town where nobody locked their doors. Well, one day there was a knock on the door, and it was 2 Nazis in black boots. And unlike in the movies, they didn't yell. One was silent, the other whispered, "You will be out of your house with only what you can carry on your back by noon tomorrow or else." Well, the next day there weren't 2 Nazis, there were 12 and 2 trucks, and now they weren't whispering. They went into the Jewish households and yelled, "Raus!" threw the very young and the aged into one truck and the able-bodied in another truck. And my father never saw his parents again. My dad was taken to work camps and finally to a death camp. Well, how did he stay alive in a death camp? Well, this was before the days of the gas chambers, and so the Nazis simply shot Jews, threw them in a pit, and shot them. My father's job, along with the other men, was to bury them. One night, with spoons, the men dug a tunnel under a pit that was near the barbed wire fence. The guards shot most of them, but my father was lucky. He escaped into the forest where he lived thanks to the good Christians who took care of him. At the end of the war, he was dropped in the Bronx without a penny to his name, no money, no English, no family, no education, only the scars of the Holocaust tortures. What did he do? No job was beneath him. The only job he could get, sewing shirts in a factory. At the end of the day, at minimum wage, what did he do? Get drunk, saying, "I'm a Holocaust survivor, I'm a victim, and in addition I have to sew shirts in a factory"? No, he went to Roosevelt High School, night school, to learn English, because he knew that unless he spoke decent English, he'd always be consigned to a low-wage job. And on Saturday, did he hang out and watch TV? No. He went to the owner of the factory and asked, "Can I take those shirts I sewed for you during the week and sell them out of a cardboard box on the street?" He bought them for $1, this was 1947, and sold them for $1.50. Did he then say, it's Saturday night, I'm now going to party down? No. You see, at Roosevelt High School, my dad met my mom, who also managed to survive Auschwitz. We were living in a dangerous Bronx neighborhood next to the elevated train that roared 24/7. No one could sleep, and my dad wanted to get us out of there, so he saved up the money that he got from selling the shirts so he could afford the rent on some store where he had more control and didn't have to make minimum wage. It was 105 Moore Street, Brooklyn, in what's still one of New York City's worst neighborhoods. The store was so small he had to store most of the merchandise on folding tables outside, and as I said, the neighborhood really was, as they say, gritty. On the weekends, the kids were out of school and would race by and steal boxes of shirts and sunglasses. My dad couldn't afford a security guard, so when I was 12, he asked me to be the security guard on Saturdays. One day business was slow, and my dad and I were standing outside. There was a parking meter in front of the store, and I remember my elbow being on one side of the meter and my dad's on the other. When you're 12, you aren't quite as self-absorbed, so I asked, Daddy, how come you so rarely talk about the Holocaust? And he stiffened, which is something he rarely did, and he said, Martin, the Nazis took 5 years from my life. I won't give them 1 minute more. Martin, never look back. Always take the next step forward. In coaching both high achievers and strugglers, the successful ones also had setbacks, but are far more likely to have followed my father's advice. Stop looking back. Take the next step forward. In any event, those are my thoughts, my plans for what I'm going to say tomorrow. I'm calling this for you. I'm calling it career advice for today's school psychology students. As usual, I welcome your thumbs up and accept your thumbs down. I always look forward to your comments and especially like it if you hit the share button below. Share on your social media so that my efforts can have broader impact. And I am flattered if you choose to subscribe to my channel. I certainly would welcome you taking a look at any of my 36 books. Perhaps most relevant is How to Do Life or Careers for Dummies. But in any event, they're all on Amazon. Thanks for watching. I'm Marty Nemko.